Hey, welcome to the show. I just sold my NES, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting to explore how I got to this point, and also what I got for my money in the end. This is going to be my first and my last video on the NES. I originally got my Nintendo when my local Game Traders was closing down. And there was this NES, $55 with cables, manuals, a controller and a copy of Super Mario Bros. 2. This was 2012, so not a bad price from a brick and mortar store at the time. So when I had a Game Traders and a cash converters and so much more spare time, picking stuff up like this was super easy. And this was my first taste of the NES scene. I never owned one as a kid, and I didn't know anyone who did either. Obviously on the internet, there are people who specifically focus on the NES and its games. I had my show for a few months, and I thought I could get some episodes out of the system too. Maybe try and hit a few of those more popular keywords. So I do have about 4 unfinished scripts, and I even got some recording done on the NES system and a few of the different games. Truth is, I just didn't have the drive to finish any of them. Suppose the worst offense of all, I just wasn't playing my NES in my downtime. I have such a big wish list and so many other systems and things that I've got my eyes on that it's really hard to justify sitting on something that I'm not using and really enjoying. I'd rather sell it to another gamer for the pocket money and start to support some of those other systems in my collection that have been neglected. So there is so much focus and attention on the NES online, and that does start to create a weird sort of balance. With the Atari Jaguar, I didn't mind spending $50 to $60 for some games like Fight for Life and Alien vs Predator. Hell, I even spent $100 on Skyhammer, but I know that they are genuinely uncommon, really hard to find games, and even the people who collect for those systems' sole source of finding games usually is going to be eBay. It's harder with the NES, where you know some of these games sold awesomely. Most sellers on eBay seem to think a boxed PAL version of Battletoads is worth $80 or more, and I don't know who's paying that. But if you want to buy it now, there are no cheaper options available at the time of recording. So I sold my Nintendo with 2 controllers and 7 games. Jackal, Guerrilla War, Super Mario Bros. 2, Smash TV, Narc, Ninja Gaiden 2 and Ark Rivals. A combination of PAL and NTSC carts, and all up, it cost about $130 to $150 to collect in the first place. My asking price was $40, but after 32 bids, I got $150 for it all. So what did I get for my NES? I'll get my action figure purchases out of the way first. Through China, I picked up a set of Ninja Turtles movie star figures from the 90s live action movie. And obviously these are knockoffs, but the original movie versions are expensive. And at $20 for the lot, I was super curious to check these guys out, see how they hold up in person, and honestly, just enjoy them. They're an awesome looking era in the TMNT toy line. Splinter looks a bit strange and stupid, but the heroes actually look pretty good. First up for the games, I've been on a bit of a Resident Evil kick. So I went to one game that blew my expectations right out of the water. Outbreak File 2. It's a game I find really interesting with some cool enemies and scenarios, and just another perspective on that Resident Evil universe. For the Dreamcast, I picked up Blue Stinger. It's pretty much a Resident Evil knockoff, but it's a Dreamcast exclusive and there's some pretty divided opinions around it. Wasn't too expensive and I was pretty keen to knock a Dreamcast game off my wish list. I opted for the Japanese version and hopefully I'll have the chance to explain why later. And talking about survival horror on the Dreamcast, for about the same price as Blue Stinger, I picked up Biohazard Code Veronica. The game itself is probably better value on the PlayStation 2, but as far as the Dreamcast goes, this is one of the best titles around, with some of the best graphics. And man, the box and artwork are fantastic. There's a bit of a collector streak coming out of me. Carrying over that horror theme, this is a Game Boy Advance game where I had real trouble justifying the cost. Pinball of the Dead. It's the most expensive item on the wish list, but it's a quirky little game, and when it comes to the handheld stuff, sometimes it's just easier owning the cart instead of using a laptop 10 times the size to emulate it. Again, the Japanese import was cheaper. It's really just a pinball game and most of it is in English anyway. It came boxed, and I really love the artwork for the House of the Dead games. So I am super stoked to say, someone actually enjoyed the show enough to donate a Game Gear with a bunch of different games. While I'm getting my head around a few of these games for the system, I thought I'd use a bit of my NES money to pick up one title I knew I wanted in particular, Shinobi 2. I find the Game Gear a really hard system to collect for. Shinobi is a flagship Sega title, a Game Gear exclusive, and it was one game I was super excited to try out on the original hardware. And lastly, this is a suggestion from a fellow awesome YouTuber, Glenn Plant. I'm finally going to check out Lylat Wars on the Nintendo 64. Obviously, Lylat Wars, or Star Fox 64, is generally considered a must-have game, but honestly, I haven't played any of them before. Glenn told me this was the best one, and I was tossing up whether or not to get the handheld version, but for a 64 game, it's actually pretty cheap. 20 bucks buy it now, and it means I'll get to use the original controller, and I get to keep all that really awesome multiplayer goodness. Not a bad roundup of titles. These were all just the buy it now prices, which I seriously don't mind picking up a few things this way. So, that still left about $25, enough money to put into a Google AdWords campaign. Really good idea, or total overkill for a web series? I guess we'll have to wait until I've got some cold hard stats, but the general idea was to boost my revenue enough to put a little bit back into promotion every month. So we'll see how that goes. So that left two games that I didn't sell in the lot, Castlevania and Double Dragon 2. Castlevania I'm still trying to sell, but Double Dragon 2 went for about 12 bucks and I bought The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors comic book. So after all that, I'm a little bit bummed that I sold the NES. It is a really fun system and the cornerstone of so many different retro video game collections. But I am stoked I got a little bit of extra pocket money out of it and I got to add some really great games to my own collection. Some might even get a review in the future. I'll just have to consider this another way the NES gave me the motivation to help me grow my channel, especially by just making this video. I would also love to hear from you gamers and collectors. Is the hobby just getting too expensive at the moment, to the point where you can't just collect everything you want, but you find yourself constantly offloading stuff to get those like really badly desired items? Anyway, thanks for watching. Feel free to comment and leave your story too, because I'd really love to hear it. We've all got growing pains at the moment, especially in the retro video game market. So yeah, feel free to share your story and cheers.